I feel like the opening segments lately have developed a pattern where they alternate between presidential history corner and viral video corner, but I guess we might as well just go with it because there are a couple bits of viral video that I want to remark on that have been making the rounds over the weekend. I believe one of them was from Friday and the other from Saturday, so let's just take them in chronological order. On Friday, an illegal alien chased a woman into a public restroom with a video camera in her own workplace and proceeded to harass and harangue and hector and threaten her while she attempted to take a leak. See, doesn't it sound pretty horrifying when you remove all the political descriptors from the equation, which it absolutely should, by the way, because civilized people don't behave that way. But then current-day radical leftists have never been overburdened with accusations of civility, have they? The woman who was chased into the bathroom was, of course, Democrat Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, whom everyone seems to call Kristen for reasons I have yet to figure out, and the illegal alien was some female student at Arizona State where Senator Sinema teaches a class when she's not busy tag-teaming with Joe Manchin of West Virginia to wreck the hopes and dreams of the radical socialist left. I have two favorite things about this particular bit of video. My first favorite thing is how so many people in the leftist chattering class and the leftist Twitterati have pretended to express shock and outrage that anyone would do such a thing as chase a person into a restroom with a video camera and record themselves yelling at the door of a bathroom stall, because the people expressing that shock and outrage are either the least self-aware people in the world, or they are the biggest lying hypocrites in the world. Let me spell this out for the leftist Twitterati, if they are in any way unclear. This was your own chickens coming home to roost, assholes. This is a young person doing exactly what you've been training and conditioning them to do for about half a decade now. When an elected official doesn't vote the way you think they should, the proper remedy is to stalk and harass and threaten them and make their life a living hell until they give you what you want. Remember Jeff Flake in the elevator during the Kavanaugh hearings? Silently staring at his shoes while some wild-eyed maniac screamed at him about believing all women or some such. Remember Maxine Waters a year after that? You get out and you create a crowd. Tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. Remember Cory Booker around that same time? When you leave here today, go and get in the faces of some members of Congress. And you morons in the leftist Twitterati, all of you guys lustily cheered all of that stuff. You fell all over each other, giving that behavior every upvote and sparkly heart and thumbs up that your mouse button and your touch screen would permit. Oh, but you guys thought they would only ever do that to Republicans, didn't you? Now that it becomes a friendly fire incident, then the fake shock and outrage come out. Funny how that happens, isn't it? My other favorite thing about that video is the way in which illegal aliens have become so emboldened that they actually brag about being illegal aliens because they think it confers that oh-so-coveted status as a member of a protected victim class, and all the fistfuls of social currency that accompany that status in this twisted, backward society in which we live. You know what I never heard that young woman say? I never heard her say, I'm really thankful that I've been allowed to live in this country, and I've been given free food, free education, free housing, free health care. I'm really thankful that nobody's deported me, despite the fact I'm in the country illegally. Nope, we didn't hear any of that. All we heard was complaint after complaint after complaint. You haven't given me a pathway to citizenship, so I couldn't go see my grandpa in Mexico before he died. Oh, you poor, poor thing. I apologize on behalf of all the people of the United States that this country only gave you 95% of everything you ever wanted and were never legally entitled to, instead of the full 100%. Your anger is duly noted. Did you ever consider saying thank you for any of that? Probably not. It was perfectly obvious that this girl was reading from some prepared list of talking points. The part about Grandpa in Mexico was probably the only part of it that didn't originate in some leftist think tank in Washington, which was then duly disseminated to whatever young illegal alien Marxist chapter that she's a member of at ASU, because the delivery just was not all that convincing. You can tell we're not dealing with a drama major here. We need to have the Build Back Better policies right now, and because of SB 70, 1070, blah, 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 because, yeah, college kids totally talk that way, right? You can tell when someone is just reciting lines that someone else wrote for them, like our good friend Sandy Cortez has been doing ever since she won that open casting call and got the gig to become the monkeys of politics. Now, the second viral video in tonight's edition of Viral Video Corner happened on Saturday, and you probably already know which video it is. At this point, you don't need me to tell you that for the last 6 or 7 weeks, a certain colorful chant has been all the rage in various college football stadiums all across the fruited plain. It's a 3-word chant in which the first word is a common 4-letter euphemism for the act of fornication, and the other 2 words are the name of the current president. To put it more simply, fuck Joe Biden. That is the chant. Not surprisingly, the chant spread to NASCAR this week, where some guy won some race. And I'm not going to pretend I'm a NASCAR aficionado here. The next auto race I ever watch will be the first one. And as he was being interviewed by the NBC sideline reporter, the crowd broke into the aforementioned chant, which was clearly and loudly audible on the TV broadcast. And bless her little heart, this sideline reporter, knowing that her number one job as a member of the mainstream fake news media is to always shill for the regime whenever possible, actually tried to tell the audience that the crowd was chanting, "Let's go, Brandon." And I felt really bad for Brandon, whatever his name is, because he looked pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. And since the fake news performance artists have always got each other's back, just like the dutiful troop of trained seals that they are, they first tried to gaslight the country into believing that it really was a "Let's go, Brandon" chant that they had heard. And if you thought you heard "fuck Joe Biden," it's because your ears were deceiving you. But then when they were roundly mocked for that lie, they switched to complimenting the reporter and pretending she had done some brave and noble thing by brazenly lying to the American public and her TV audience. So I guess that's where we are now. Even freaking NASCAR sideline reporters are trying to slather lipstick on the pig that is Joe Biden's failed presidency. Which begs the question, if you get demoted from being a NASCAR sideline reporter, where the hell do they reassign you? The dog show? The hot dog eating contest? Inquiring minds want to know, so while the audience ponders that question, Jim Eagle, hit the music, please. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we maximize the value for the ticket-buying public by combining the stock car race, the dog show, and the hot dog eating contest into the same event. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant, and we need to talk about something that's been making the rounds in the last week or 10 days or so, something the mainstream media and even some independent commentators have really been leaning into. And it's this idea that the American people have become so intractably polarized, so irretrievably alienated from one another, that it's going to culminate in either some sort of civil war or, to use the quaint, naive term that's been bandied about, a peaceful divorce. Now, first of all, if you think there's any such thing as a peaceful divorce, where a country can just partition itself and everybody slaps each other on the back and goes their separate ways, then my God, please develop some rudimentary acquaintance with world history before you start talking out your ass. Because I don't think it's a lot to ask. When countries try to partition themselves, there are only ever 4 outcomes. War, famine, mass human displacement, more war, and more famine. And I guess that's 5 things, but you get the point. If you're a student of African history, you can blindfold yourself, throw a dart at a map of that continent, and it will land on a spot where hundreds of thousands of people have died just within the past 30 years when countries have tried to partition themselves. If you're looking for examples that involve the countries of the Anglosphere, there are 2 stark ones from the past 160 years, the most recent one being the partition of India in 1947, where Lord Mountbatten got tired of trying to broker a deal between the Hindus and the Muslims, and eventually he just threw up his hands and said, fine, we'll just split the thing in half. The Muslims can have their country, the Hindus can have their country. We're leaving on August 15th, and you all can figure out the rest. And there followed, after that, 5 years of total war in which between 1 million and 2 million people were killed. A war whose bloodlust and brutality was matched in the 20th century possibly only by the war between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union in 1941 to 45. This was a war that made the American Civil War look like a friendly tennis match. Ethnic cleansing, religious genocide, organized mass rape, the whole 9 yards. And when things finally settled down, when all the death marches and displacements were complete, and there was something like a mutual agreement on where the boundary was going to be between India and Pakistan, that only lasted until around 1970 when Bangladesh decided to split off from Pakistan, which started a whole new war in which at least 1 million more were killed, and a new famine which claimed the lives of at least another 1 million. Today, India and Pakistan, of course, are mortal enemies, each armed with nuclear weapons, each of whom would love nothing more than an excuse to blow up the whole subcontinent, as long as it means killing the other guy, because nothing has happened in the interim to assuage the hatred and the resentments of 1947. If and when there is a second hostile use of nuclear armaments on this planet, there is an overwhelming likelihood that it's going to involve India and Pakistan. So was that partition worth it? Because Gandhi sure didn't think so. He was assassinated before he ever saw the full extent of the carnage and the bloodshed. But he knew it was all going to be bad, and at the time of his own death, he considered his life's work to have been a failure because he knew a unified India where Muslims and Hindus had never been big fans of each other, but they had lived more or less in peace in integrated communities together for centuries, was preferable to any form of partition. And you don't need me to tell you that the partition, we once attempted one in our own country, where, of course, our southern states attempted to break away from the northern states, and even though that war was positively polite and civilized compared to what happened on the Indian subcontinent, 600,000 Americans were killed in the space of barely 4 years. But in defense of that war, it wasn't fought just because two opposing factions wanted to bathe in each other's blood. It was fought for a righteous purpose, and it had the effect of eradicating the monstrous moral evil of involuntary human servitude from this continent for all time. But make no mistake, there's not going to be any peaceful divorce here in the 21st century. Not in this country or any other country. If you want to have a second civil war, the best way to get one is to attempt a peaceful divorce. I guess the Czechs and the Slovaks managed to pull it off, but I'll be damned if I can think of any other example from the last 200 years of world history. But the only reason we're talking this way and indulging any of this silliness, which doesn't warrant the dignity of being indulged, is because too many people have bought into this nonsense, this false, destructive paradigm about red states and blue states. I have been doing this program for 13 months and 160 episodes now, and if you've watched every single video, you have never heard me use the red state, blue state shorthand, which is a creation of the fake news industrial complex, which they use as an invented wedge to divide people who have no good reason to divide themselves because they think division and polarization and partisan bloodlust are good for business. We do not hate and mistrust one another nearly as much as we think we do. We enjoy screaming abuse at each other on the internet. But we say things online that we would never actually say to the face of another human being. And we pretend to know things, to think things we don't really think. Largely because we place entirely too much stock in that false dichotomy of the blue team and the red team, which is good for business not just for the big tech oligarchs and the fake news industrial complex, but also for the leaders of the big money corporations that masquerade as our two major political parties. As long as they can keep pulling those puppet strings and setting us against one another, as long as they can distract our attention from what's really happening, as long as they can make us believe we have no common purpose, that it's each other we should be warring with instead of them, then they have got it made. They will continue laughing all the way to the bank, marveling at how easy it is to pull off this same con job for so many decades and centuries. But when you set the red team, blue team stuff off to the side, when you stop viewing politics and governance like it's just a goddamn football game where you want your side to win and the other side to lose, when you stop looking at the map and seeing this red state, blue state bullshit nonsense, and most importantly, when you stop allowing yourself to be a marionette in a pantomime of false, contrived racial and ethnic grievance, I would submit there is still much that unites us. I would submit that the vast majority of Americans are still fundamentally decent people who believe, whether they realize it or not, whether they choose to admit it or not, in the same core principles of liberal democracy that first animated the founding of this republic. Should people have the right to choose their own leaders? Should those in government be responsive to the desires of the citizenry? Should the people of a certain town or city or region have the right to make their own rules and to govern themselves according to their own values, with minimal interference from bureaucrats they've never met who sit thousands of miles away? When you remove all the partisan descriptors, all the reflexive hostility, all the red team, blue team nonsense from the equation, how many Americans would answer no to any of those questions? Because I suspect not very many. The people who are agitating so fervently for all these socialist policies right now, they don't actually want to live in a socialist society. Nobody actually wants to live in a socialist society. That's why the people who oppose socialism the hardest are the people who have actually lived under socialism. How many Cuban exiles do you see agitating for a Marxist future in America? How many people who used to live behind the Iron Curtain do you see agitating for communism? I don't need you to answer the question because you know what the answer is. The only people who advocate for Marxism and communism and socialism are people who have spent their entire lives living fat and happy in a world of capitalist plenty under the systems that they claim to think are so very, very evil. But they don't really think that. They've been conned into thinking they think that, and it goes back to the false bullshit paradigm of the red team and the blue team. The thing the Democrats and the Republicans fear the most is that the people will realize that this whole thing is a scam, that liberals have no representation in the Democrat Party and conservatives have no representation in the Republican Party. So they distract you with all these shiny objects, things that don't really matter, because that's the easiest path to maintaining their own power and their own monopoly. If we had a liberal party that represents liberals and a conservative party that represents conservatives, then we might quickly get back to realizing that we broadly agree on the fact that the American Republic was founded along lines and according to principles that we all broadly agree with and wish to maintain. We used to express this agreement up until very recently by simple acts like standing for the flag and showing our respect during the playing of the national anthem. But the people who make their money by keeping us divided, they came after all of that. Now the flag and the anthem are just another act of political side choosing, which is exactly how your self-appointed overlords, the people who take the money from your pocket while laughing at your gullibility, want it to be. And of course they came after sports as well, because that was another venue where we could indulge our tribalistic impulses, my team against your team, in a completely harmless way, where nobody gets hurt, nobody hates each other, where a liberal season ticket holder and a conservative season ticket holder can sit next to each other all season long, have good conversations, enjoy each other's company, and revel in the things they have in common, like the fact that they both support the home team, rather than in the things on which they disagree. But now politics has been interjected into everything because the people who wish to see us impoverished and enfeebled don't want us to think we have anything in common, so they have attacked every thread of our common culture and tried to tear it asunder, and they have largely succeeded because, frankly, we've allowed them to succeed. But it's not too late to turn these forces back. We're getting pretty close, we're standing on the precipice, but we still have a fighting chance if we just start realizing, first, that the internet is not the real world, that the red state, blue state dichotomy is not a real thing, and we would rather deal with one another as individual human beings possessed of the fundamental qualities of altruism and basic decency, than as representatives of skin colors and ethnicities and sexualities and all the other things that our puppet masters use to drive us apart and separate us into opposing camps. In your real life, when you're not online, you probably know plenty of people who don't share your political worldview, and you probably get along just fine because you work in the same workplace, or you live in the same community, or your kids are friends with each other, or you share a common recreational interest, or whatever. So fuck all that red team, blue team bullshit. Save that stuff for the stadium. In real life, it is nothing but brain poison. There are no red states and blue states. Even the bluest blue state and the reddest red state have 40% of the population that thinks differently, and we would all do well to remember that. And when some smug little bastard like Tony Fauci tries to cancel Christmas and break up your family, there is only one fitting response. Tell him to go get fucked. Thanks for watching. See you Wednesday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.